Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today is the 24th of May, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So apologies for missing yesterday's episode. I did mention in the Discord channel that I have been missing pretty much an episode a week for I guess like the last 4 or 5 weeks or something like that. And I've been trying really hard not to do that, but yeah, things just happen, things just end up coming up. And because I record these quite late my time, like it's 10 p.m. right now, I usually record them between 10 and 11 p.m. It can, I can run into other things I need to do, and then I run out of time to record a refuel. So that's why it usually happens like that. So I'm going to try and change when I do the refuel and do it earlier in the day. I usually wait until late so that I can get all the news from like the last 24 hours from when I did the previous episode and make sure I'm covering everything, as close to up to date as possible. But yeah, I mean, it's been harder and harder for me to record at the same time, so I might need to do it a few hours earlier, which is fine. I mean, it's not a big deal, and I think it should be able to work out better so I stop missing episodes. But anyway, back today to cover the news from the last 2 days. So first off, we're starting off with a new release from Prysm. So this is their, I guess, like more baked release that has a lot of the fixes and optimizations that will hopefully, and I mean, seem to have so far, but will hopefully lead to a much more robust Prysm client, and so that we don't see those finality issues we saw again. Now, the reason why I say this is a more baked update was that the fixes in the previous releases were basically, I wouldn't say they were rushed out, but it was done really quickly, obviously, because we wanted to make sure that the network stopped running into those finality issues, because it happened once and obviously everyone was like, okay, why is this happening? And then we figured out why it happened, and then it happened again 24 hours later, and everyone's like, wow, okay, we need to get a hot fix out there right now. These things are usually called hot fixes, right? And then they're like, we'll do the hot fix and then we'll release a more baked version of the client with more improvements, more stable improvements later on, which is exactly what they've done here. So if you are running Prysm, you should definitely upgrade to version 4.0.5. And I believe that the Rockable Smart Node upgrade came out today as well, 1.9.5, I think, which also contains this client update, so you can update it there. But also, if you're running Rockable Mini Pools, fun fact, you can actually just manually update it by changing the release container in the Rockable config. So you don't have to actually wait for a new Rocket Pool Smart Node update. You can actually just go in there and manually add it yourself, and that goes for any release on any kind of CL EL client that Smart Node stack supports, which is pretty cool, obviously. But yeah, great to see that this has come out not too, I guess, long after the issues. I think the issues were a week and a half ago now, and we have a major update in this from the Prior Labs team here to address a lot of those issues, which is really great to see, along with a bunch of other issues, I think, as well, which you can read the full details of in the GitHub release, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. All right, so a few things about ETH staking. I talk about ETH staking a lot on the refuel, but these things are quite important, I think, and quite interesting. So, Remy Murray from the ETH Staker group here has announced that there's a new release of the Eth-wizard tool. So, for those of you who don't know, the Eth-wizard tool is an easy way to set up a full Ethereum validator node on Ubuntu or Windows in less than 5 minutes. So now it comes with a step to install, configure, and maintain MEV boost automatically. So I've talked about this before and mentioned how this is something that I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of, as it obviously keeps getting improved over time, in order to make it really easy for you to just do that one-click install of running an Ethereum validator as a home staker, right, a solo staker. Because still, I mean, there are guides out there. I've mentioned some of eStats guides before. I've mentioned CoinCashew's guides. I've mentioned a few other video guides out there on the refuel, but at the end of the day, those guides are still not beginner level, right? I would say that you could start as a beginner and learn your way around it, but it's not like a plug and play thing, and it's definitely not something where you can essentially go there, just copy paste everything in, and it'll be okay. You can copy paste it all in, but you're going to run into roadblocks doing that, and you're going to need to know various ways to get out of those roadblocks. And funny enough, a lot of the time you can get out of them by just googling the issue, but a lot of people don't actually Google things when it comes to computers. They just, it's not something that they do, right? It's not a muscle they know how to use, which was always bizarre to me growing up because that's what I did. I mean, I've been tinkering with computers since I was really young, but and whenever I ran into issues, I would just Google the answer, and 9 times out of 10, Google would actually have the answer for me because someone else ran into that same issue, right? And then there's a forum post and there's Stack Overflow and things like that, and you'd fix it. But I started doing a lot of tech support for friends and family, and I said to them, I'm like, did you Google, did you try to fix this yourself before calling me? And they're like, no, right? What? Can I do that? I'm like, oh, what? What do you mean? Can you do that? What do you use Google? And yeah, I use Google. I'm like, okay, well, you just type in the question, right? And the same is true for these AI tools like ChatGPT and things like that. They're going to get to the point where essentially they're going to just be your virtual help desk, essentially, for all things computer related. But in saying all of that, I think just for the everyday user, they shouldn't have to be expected to go through those hoops to get started being a solo Ethereum validator. So that's why people like Stakehouse, which Remy Roy is part of here, groups like Stakehouse, I should say, are building tools like Eth-wizard to just make it as dead simple as possible to get started solo staking. Now, I think other than Eth-wizard, there's also, in terms of like one-click solo validating, there's also Dapnote and Novato, which I've talked about on the Refuel as well. They're great solutions. But yeah, it's just another one out there. I don't want there to just be one easy-to-use solution. I want there to at least be 2 or 3 out there, if not more. Obviously, a lot of the time, they're not something that's going to be making money for the people creating it. They're not going to be, it's not going to be like a recurring source of revenue, especially if it's open source and just completely free to use. There are obviously add-ons that can be put onto there for the teams to make money, but really, I mean, with Dapnote and Nevada, they sell the hardware as well, so that's one way, and they're more of a public good, so they get money via Gitcoin, things like that. But generally, these things are done as public goods. They're not done as something that is a profit motive thing. It's not like a proper business with VC backing and stuff like that. And I think it actually has to remain like that, because as soon as you start introducing profit incentives and profit motives into things like this, what ends up happening is that the most logical conclusion is for the service to take a fee. So if the service is taking a fee, I wouldn't consider that to be like true home staking or true solo staking. I know Rocket Pool takes a fee here, but Rocket Pool is more of a network, right? It is a network. It's not like a centralized company taking that fee. I think that's where I draw the distinction, where if it's a decentralized network, then I think that's okay. Even if it's like a centralized network with only a small group of entities like Lido, I think it's okay. But when it becomes something like a centralized exchange, for example, or just like one entity, one party taking a fee, I think it can definitely warp incentives, and obviously it's not a public good in that world. So I would prefer these things to stay as public goods, but I know that obviously the people building these things need to eat. They need to get paid for their work, and hopefully they can continue getting paid via things like Gitcoin. But honestly, I wouldn't blame them if they went out and raised money, and then maybe they never they never generate revenue, but they were able to raise money to build this thing, and then it just becomes a public good that it's maintained by people who just love doing this stuff. And there's plenty of infrastructure on the entire internet, not just in crypto, that is maintained via altruism, right? A lot of these people aren't even paid when they should definitely be paid. I remember reading a story quite a while ago that a lot of the major tech companies were using this piece of open source software. I can't remember exactly what it was, and I think it was like 1 or 2 people maintaining it, and there was a massive vulnerability in it at one point. I think the vulnerability was called Heartbleed, and it might have been OpenSSL. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was like 2 people maintaining this, and they're doing it for free. The companies weren't paying them to do this, even though they were using it, and they were using it for a large part of their business, which just seems insane to me. And it seems like something that crypto can hopefully solve, because I think it's a coordination issue. But it seems insane to me that we have these open source tools that people maintain really for free, even though these businesses are generating hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of revenue from using these things. And I think the same is true for a lot of Ethereum infrastructure just generally, and that's why I think there's been such a strong push towards funding public goods as well, not only with things like Gitcoin, but also the Protocol Guild funding core development, because we've seen people make stupid amounts of money both building stuff on Ethereum, but also forking Ethereum, forking all the work that the researchers and devs do, and slap a token on it, right? Like a lot of the other L1s are just forked versions of the EVM, which is built by Ethereum core developers and researchers, and then they slap a token on it, and then they make hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, whereas these core devs, they don't get any of that. They don't see any of that. So it's the same kind of concept here. But with crypto, at least we have at least within Ethereum, we have a very strong, motivation to fund public goods, but also a very strong norm to fund public goods and get money to them. I mean, the Protocol Guild alone is sending a lot of money to core devs and researchers, and hopefully it'll get to a point where they have so much money there that they can send, it'll become millions per contributor. I mean, maybe not every contributor because of the different weightings, but still, that's a lot. But the funny thing is that it's still not anywhere near the amount that people get for forking the code base and stuff like that. So you can really see that a lot of the time people do this out of love for, I guess, like Ethereum in this example, and a lot of out of love for what they're building. But that doesn't mean that they should do it for free. They should definitely get paid for that. But anyway, that's a little bit of a rant there. You can go check out Eth-wizard for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, speaking of staking, the Swell network, Swell Voyage, is now live. So you can join now to collect something they're calling pearls and become a citizen of the Swell DAO. So the TLDR is that you can earn pearls as becoming part or partaking in this voyage, and early voyagers, including holders of Swell Discord roles, will be able to begin earning pearls in exchange for helping to prepare for the voyage, and are in a good position to maximize the number of pearls that they collect in total. Pearls can be collected throughout the voyage by holding SWETH, which is the LSD token for Swell here, and providing liquidity. And then you can check out all the details here in this blog post about what this entails. So essentially, it's I wouldn't call it like a liquidity mining program, but they're like incentive program that they're doing to get more people to stake with Swell. And honestly, I've been very impressed with Swell lately. I remember I've talked about Swell a lot in the past, and I've said to you guys, as a disclosure, I'm an investor in them before, so obviously I have exposure to them here. But I've been talking about them for a long time now, and they only launched recently. And I've just really liked their marketing and business development that they've been doing, especially the branding that they're going for with these little frogs here that their voyage branding, and like explore the ocean and collect pearls and things like that. I really love their marketing and branding here. I think it just makes them stand out a lot because obviously, Rockapool has their defined branding. They're very orange. That's like a meme in the community. You have Lido has their defined branding, and the other kind of LSTs as well. But I think that there are strong brands and then there are weak brands. If you like Rockapool, I think is a very strong brand. They have the rocket stuff. They have the orange. I think that's quite strong. I think Swell is developing themselves quite a strong brand with these frogs and these little characters and these little drawings and animations and stuff like that. It gets my attention. Lido's branding has never been its strong suit. I think they're much stronger in the business development department than they are in the branding department, because I couldn't just like think of Lido and think of the top of my head what their branding is. I think maybe their branding is just that they're so big. Like it's kind of ironic how that can happen, where you get so big and you get so dominant that is your brand, where everyone knows that you're the dominant player. And then the other LSTs, probably most of them are too small to really talk about right now, because really, I mean, if I bring up the Raider.network site here and we can check out the other LSTs in terms of market share, I mean, Coinbase and Binance I don't consider to be and Kraken, they're exchanges, right? I'm talking like pure LSTs here. I mean, the only other one really is Frax. I know they have their own community. I don't know what kind of branding they have if we're talking at it from a branding perspective. But yeah, I think Rockapool and Swell seem to be the leaders right now in terms of branding and standing out, which I think is just really, really cool. But anyway, you can go read the details about this voyage here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. And Swell might be something that you're interested in staking with to help, obviously, with the further decentralization of the Ethereum network. All right, so I came across a tweet here from ETH on Twitter a couple days ago, where they were highlighting where a lot of the ETH was going from Lido. Like when it was withdrawn from Lido, where was it going? Like what other service was it going to? Now, I saw this big chart here that basically showed the Celsius withdrawal, which was 444,000 ETH, I believe, or something like that, which came out of Lido's buffer. I think pretty much all of it has come out of Lido's buffer so far, like all the ETH that has been withdrawn. Basically, I asked for a chart with without that because I believe that's an outlier, the Celsius withdrawal, and ETHwave was kind enough to create one for me here using data that Tom Wan had put together here as well. So you should definitely go check out Tom Wan's stuff and ETHwave stuff here, and I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But if you look at it without Celsius's withdrawal, you can see where all this stake is going to. Now, this plays into what I've been talking about for a while now about this great reshuffling that I figured that we'd see post-merge. Now, obviously, this doesn't show all of the reshuffling. It's just showing people going from Lido to elsewhere. So essentially here, at time that this data was created, outside of the Celsius withdrawal, there was 16,700 ETH withdrawn, with most of it going to Rocket Pool. So 7,700 went to Rocket Pool, 3,100 went to Frax, and then the remainder went to a bunch of other services such as Binance, Swell, and a few others here. So only 336 of it was restaked with Lido Finance, which makes sense, I guess. If there's probably just like an arbitrage thing that's happening there, more so than users withdrawing. But I thought this was just a very interesting piece of data to show on the refuel. Now, I did say before that I would like to wait a while before seeing this kind of data. It's been a month, right? It's been more than a month now since withdrawals went live. It's coming up on 6 weeks actually since withdrawals went live. But I still don't think that's long enough to do any kind of detailed retrospective. And obviously, this is just Lido. I would like to see the whole network. So I'm hoping that. Well, maybe I won't hope. Maybe I'm going to pay someone to do this for me in a year's time. So on the anniversary of Chapala, so on April 13th or 14th, whatever it was, in 2024, I want to do like a 12-month retrospective of ETH staking and see where all the ETH was withdrawn from and where it went to, as well as where all the new stake went to, and then just break all of that down and see who were the winners, who were the losers. Did we actually improve the decentralization of the Ethereum network? How did the market share change? Who are the new players? Who are the players that won? Who are the players that lost? And all that stuff. But as I said, I don't think it's enough data yet. I think that it's cool to look at this and see that a reshuffling is happening to an extent, but it's not like a great reshuffling, right? There's not hundreds of thousands of ETH leaving Lido to go elsewhere. Celsius, for some reason, obviously you guys know Celsius is currently in a bankruptcy proceeding, but by not having that ETH staked, the amount of ETH that they have right now staked, they're missing out on a shit ton of money. I think it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars a day or something like that by not staking this ETH. I don't know exactly how much it is, even if it's only 100K a day. Only, right? That's how much they're missing out. So the opportunity cost here is absolutely massive for them to have just withdrawn from Lido and not restaked. Now, in saying that, if they were to restake all of that ETH right now, they'd have to go through the queue. So what would end up happening is that they could restake with Lido, and then the way Lido does it is that they have this buffer thing, and then the yield is shared across everyone as long as you're holding ST ETH. They could just go with Lido, but if they wanted to not go with Lido, and let's say they wanted to stake all of it on their own, well, they would have to go into the deposit queue, which is currently around 38 days, I believe. So they would miss out on 38 days worth of stake there. They're already missing out. But 38 days, to speak about the opportunity cost here, guys, is massive. If they're missing out on $100,000 a day, that's $3.8 million that they miss out on by just going through and trying to stake now. So I don't know if that's the reason they haven't done it. I think it's a bit of a silly reason. It may have something to do with the bankruptcy stuff, where maybe they're not allowed to have ETH staked. Maybe they only had it staked because they were waiting for withdrawals to be enabled, because they pretty much withdraw from Lido shortly after withdrawals were enabled on Lido. So and as far as I know, they're still holding it as ETH. So we'll have to see what happens to that. I don't know. Given that they're in a bankruptcy proceeding, some of that ETH may be sold. Obviously, a lot of it is customers' ETH. So we'll have to see where that ends up there. But as I said, cool chart here from Eth-wave, who shared it and using Tom Wan's data here. But as I said, I'm going to wait and do that proper retrospective at the 12-month mark when that happens next year. All right, so the Privacy and Scaling Explorations group from the Ethereum Foundation here has put out a blog post titled ZK EVM Community Edition Part 1. So the ZK EVM Community Edition is exploring how zero-knowledge proofs can verify every Layer 1 block. This series explores the common components, logic, and structure of this collaborative effort to scale Ethereum. So this is basically I think this is mostly talking about like enshrining a ZK EVM at layer one Ethereum. There's also the concept of snarkifying the base layer, which is something that Vitalik has spoken about for a little while, but I don't think that is that's got to do with this. I think this is a separate thing where essentially being able to enshrine a ZK a ZK EVM into the L1. Now you can read the post here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But there's also a part 2 of the components and a part 3 of logic and structure as well, which is available here. So if you're interested in this sort of stuff, as I said, it'll be linked in the YouTube description below. But this stuff is very bleeding edge, and there's a hot debate, I think, across the crypto ecosystem generally right now about like enshrined versus non-enshrined rollups. And the ecosystem I think that is doing enshrined rollups and is furthest along with it so far is Tezos, from what I've seen. And I personally am still neutral on it. I think that they both, as I've explained in the past, I think that they both have their pros and cons, but I'm rather neutral because I haven't seen enough, I guess, like research, development, and usage of enshrined rollups to make a kind of more informed, a view on this, especially because we don't have it in Ethereum. Like, it's all well and good for there to be an enshrined rollup on Tezos, but there's hardly any activity on Tezos, and for it to be at the same level of Ethereum, it would have to grow like 1,000x or something. So when I think about that, I think really the only way I'm going to be able to form a good view on it is seeing this on Ethereum layer 1. Now, we may never get in like a proper enshrined rollup on Ethereum layer 1. It may just become a thing where everyone agrees that it's too complex. There's no point because we already have all the ZKVMs and other rollups at layer 2, so it doesn't really make sense to enshrine it as part of layer 1, but who knows, right? That's up in the air. There's no definitive answer on that yet, but I mean, I say I'm neutral. I think I'm neutral with like a bias towards non-enshrined rollups, just because I really like the fact that with a non-enshrined rollup, you can have many of them, and you can have many different approaches to it, and you can have many different teams working on it, and you can have more of an expressive ecosystem that is more of a bazaar model than a cathedral model. So, for example, you have Arbitrum 1, which is different to Optimism, which is obviously different to the ZK AVMs, and then you have different types of ZK rollups and ZK AVMs, like Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, and you have non-EVM rollups, and you have private rollups like Aztec. The non-EVM ones, obviously stuff like Starknet. So if you were to do an enshrined rollup, you wouldn't have any of that because the enshrined rollup would have to basically abide by the rules of the layer 1. So you would lose a lot of that expressivity. What you would gain is an extremely secure roll. I mean, the most secure construction of a rollup ever, because it would basically be baked into the layer 1 protocol. And you would also, I believe, you would gain, I think the main benefit people kind of, I guess, talk about is the fact that you can just use ETH. There's no need for an external token, and you can basically just use the validators as your sequencers, the existing Ethereum L1 validators as your sequencers. I mean, I don't think that that's a big deal as long as as long as these rollups continue to use ETH as gas. But again, they're probably not even going to use ETH as gas because they're probably going to abstract that away eventually, and the end user will just pay in like maybe whatever token they want, and then ultimately it will obviously settle down to Ethereum layer 1 as ETH as an ETH fee. But generally, yeah, I don't know. I don't find them very convincing arguments. But there are pros and cons, as I said. I just would like to see this play out on a big ecosystem like Ethereum before I made any kind of strong opinions on it. It's more of just like a general view that I have, or a general bias that I have towards the non-enshrined rollups, but it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out over time. Anyway, you can check out the blog post. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. So speaking of layer 2s and rollups, Bartek had a great tweet thread here talking about Vitalik's different milestones for rollup maturity. Now, I have obviously talked about this a lot on the Refuel before, and this was Vitalik's post on the Fellowship of Ethereum Magicians forum, where he said proposed milestones for rollups taking off training wheels, and he split this up into 3 different stages. So stage 0 has got full training wheels, stage 1 limited training wheels, and stage 2 no training wheels. Now, Bartek's thread basically talks about this and says how L2Beat will be soon displaying the stage of a rollup of the rollup on its page. But however, it is worth noting that given the complexity of actual implementations, the team had to first make sure that all rollup parameters are correct and up to date. So obviously, when reporting on this stuff and when showing it on kind of sites that are trying to be an authority like L2Beat, you want to make sure you get this as correct as possible. And I think Vitalik's post was a good springboard, but there are edge cases here that could, for example, put something in stage 1 instead of stage 0, and maybe L2B listed as stage 0, and there's a disagreement there, and the team says, no, we're stage 1 based on Vitalik's definition. So you always need to have things defined and especially catch those edge cases. And I think that's what Bartek's trying to do with L2Beat, obviously, as well, and the L2Beat team is doing generally. But anyway, you can read Bartek's tweet thread. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so there has been a lot of talk about crypto gaming for quite a while now. Web3 gaming, crypto gaming, NFTs. There is a lot of money that's gone into this. There's a lot of projects working on this. Personally, I haven't seen anything that's too appealing to me yet. A lot of it looks like games that you would see in just like non-crypto gaming, but with a lot of NFT stuff or crypto stuff bolted on just for the sake of it. There's one big exception here, and that is a lot of the things being done in the Starknet ecosystem with the different game engines that are being developed here. And Terrence.eth here, who is building a cartridge and works in the Starknet ecosystem, has highlighted why this dojo that he's calling it is great. And he's saying here that it's the first provable game engine. It leverages Cairo to ensure the integrity of a game's execution logic, enabling developers to easily build complex, verifiable games and autonomous world on top of Starknet. Now, this concept of autonomous world is something that's been talked about a lot as well. Optimism has also done stuff here, but essentially this is the stuff that's most interesting to me, stuff that's actually leveraging crypto primitives to create something new instead of just bringing the games that we're all used to from the non-crypto space into crypto and then slapping NFTs and crypto stuff on it, which a lot of the time just looks like Ponzi mechanics. And I personally really don't like a lot of games these days. I used to be a massive gamer, but a lot of games these days have these Ponzi mechanics in them or have these microtransactions and have all this crap in them, and it really just makes me not want to play them. I play a lot of indie games these days because for the most part they don't have that stuff, but AAA games generally have just become such garbage, and I feel like crypto is taking the worst parts of AAA gaming and bringing it into crypto and being like, hey, we have a crypto game. When in reality, to me, a crypto game is something that takes advantage of crypto primitives other than NFTs and other than, the Ponzinomics and stuff like that, which is exactly what ecosystems like Starknet are trying to do with these provable game engines, which you can read about in this thread from Terrence here, because it's quite a long thread, but very interesting, and I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But that's what I would be focusing on, guys. This stuff in the Starknet ecosystem, the autonomous world stuff. Polinia has actually had a few blog posts about this recently. If you go to their profile, you'll find it on there, rather than focusing on a lot of the other stuff. Now, I know I not to say that the other stuff hasn't got merit and that I'm not excited about a lot of it, but I think that the other stuff suffers a lot from the a lot of the stuff just being like pure experiments where the ones that get the most attention are the ones with the best Ponzinomics, and then the incentives get warped. But I don't think that the platforms themselves are at fault here for that. Like, for example, Immutable X. I'm a big fan of that ecosystem, but the incentives can sometimes get warped where you build something on that platform and you say, okay, well, how can I get attention on this? Oh, I'll do some liquidity mining, or I'll do some incentives, and then it gets warped. And the same is true for pretty much everything in crypto. But for me, the most interesting stuff is stuff like autonomous worlds and provable game engines and a lot of the stuff happening in the Starknet ecosystem. But as I said, you can check out this thread. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below. All right, I just wanted to highlight this funny meme from Milwaukee here, where he says, how to DAO in 2 easy steps. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast can't see my screen, it's just a meme with the neutral Wojak face saying, step 1, fuck around. And then the second step is find out, which is a face of the green Wojak with the up arrows, and then the basically the defeated Wojak, or the Wojak with all the scribbly lines on it, if you've seen that before. And then underneath it, it's got the crying Wojak and the euphoric Wojak, and then repeat. So the reason why it's like this is because DAOs are really awesome and really cool when they work and they're cohesive. But when they don't work and when they're not cohesive, they are really, really bad. They are so bad that a lot of the DAOs that I've seen have really just turned into ways to loot the treasury and kill the project, and then the locusts just move on, right? They just take the money and they move on. But the DAOs that work, the DAOs that can coordinate properly, the DAOs that are run like well-oiled machines, admittedly, there's not many of them, but the ones that are like that, at least maybe they started off like that and then became obviously the other DAOs. They're beautiful things. The key thing that we have to do in the Ethereum ecosystem is figure out how to take the early stages of a DAO where it's actually working properly and scale that up and make sure that the late stages of the DAO don't just turn into a free-for-all, loot the treasury, and go on our merry way. And I think that we can solve that, but it really is all coordination. And coordination issues have plagued humanity since day one. And we solved it to an extent. We solved it with like the worst case systems, which is the systems that a lot of the first world has today. Obviously, talking about democracy, but I'm not saying democracy is bad, but it really is the least worst system. I mean, the best argument against democracy is having a 10-minute conversation with your average voter, because really most people, the vast majority of people, are not informed enough to be making informed votes, or don't pay enough attention to be making informed votes as part of a democratic system. So what ends up happening is that in a democracy, it ends up just becoming a popularity contest where the loudest voices win. And we've seen this play out time and time again. That's not to say democracy is bad. It's just the least worst system, because all the other systems that we've tried to do through governance have actually been worse. But it's not like democracy is great. It's great for what it is, but we can potentially do better. And that's what humans have been doing for tens of thousands of years, evolving our governance processes. And DAOs are just another form that they can take. But yeah, DAOs suffer from a very big scaling or structural scaling problem, where essentially as soon as they reach a certain size, turns into free-for-all Wild West and everything goes to shit. So that's why I think Wookie created this meme, because he's had a lot of experience with different types of DAOs and how things can get, how things can be euphoric and how things can be really, really shitty. But anyway, on that note, I'm going to leave it at that for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.